for me to call you Ripu and not Dr. Malhotra.
That's just fine, Michael. Thank you so much for asking me to join you today.
Yes. Now, am I correct? The Biden administration has not released any details on its advanced electric grid initiative.
I think the answer is a little more nuanced. They have certainly laid down their opening bid. A few months back, they announced a fact sheet of what they were proposing for the plans. And of course, plans are one thing. Whether you can make a good legislation out of it, it might take a little time. So I don't know exactly, but yes, it's a first step. It's a step in that direction.
Good.
But one shouldn't expect that this thing will by itself solve the climate and the energy problem that we face.
Important analysts like you, do you think of the grid as having three components: the delivery component, the creation of electricity component, and the consumption component?
I think that's a very fine way of describing. You have to generate the power, you have to distribute it, send it and distribute it to all the users, and the users have to consume it.
Again, before we get into any complexity or detail, just stepping back, when you think of the billions of dollars that are going to be invested in the electric grid, which of those three elements or components do you think the bulk of the money or the greatest percentage will be invested in?
Oh, I think most of the money that any bill that comes out will invest in will be in the generation. I think it's in the generation, whether it's the offshore wind that they had proposed, which could be, they had proposed 200 billion in that. I don't know if they'll spend that much money on it, but but then there is a lot of stuff in the distribution, the hardening of the grid, putting in long range transmission, high voltage DC transmission to make it resilient, installing those synchrophasers in the grid to balance the instantaneously and also prevent any minimize the fire dangers and stuff like that. Those are all, they're pretty expensive and they will be done. But generation is the biggest.
Okay, before we get into generation, first of all, you gave us some detail on the delivery aspects and the hardening of the wires, and I heard synchronous phasers, and I also heard fire. Would you briefly put synchronous phasers and fire in a context that all of us would understand?
Sure. Okay. So, when electricity is being transmitted over long distances, and if there is a problem somewhere, and there is a mismatch between what is demanded and what is being generated, it causes problems in the grid. And synchrophasers are constantly monitoring what's happening, who's asking for that. And the other beauty of the synchrophasers is that it should a wire drop off, fall because of a tree or something like that, synchrophasers will immediately sense that there's something wrong has happened here and shut the grid shut power to that wire right away. I have heard that it can shut it before the wire hits the ground, when the short could really instigate the fires and initiate the fires. And so those are the kinds of things. The main use of the synchrophasers is not to prevent fires. That's a side benefit from it that'll come up, is really to balance. Electricity is one of the things, we don't have a lot of storage, and so it has to be generated at the same time that it's being used. So we have to constantly match the generation and the consumption. And these two parts need to be always in balance.
Consumption makes me think of buildings, homes, different kind of hospitals, industry, etc. And in consumption, are you thinking about making buildings or connections to buildings smart connections? Is that in the, well, that's a little related, I think, to
Yeah,
consumption.
yeah, it is. It is
But
related.
but can you say something about the growth of consumption?
Yeah. So the big growth that I am seeing is there's this drive to electrify the transportation sector. Right now, our cars run on gasoline, but we want to be running them on electricity. So, we need a lot more power uh, to get to the cars. And so we also need a distribution network of chargers. And the energy that is currently being obtained from gasoline will have to somehow be generated by, uh, you know, some means, some electricity, generation systems. So we need to increase our generation capacity quite a bit.
Do you have a sense of how much electricity is going through the United States grid right now, or do you have a number for that value?
Yeah, so annual consumption of electricity in the United States has been steadily about 4,000 terawatt hours. I'm using round numbers. Okay, a kilowatt hour is what the unit is that's sold for 30 cents or 10 cents, or depending on where you are and the time of the day and all that. Or even it can be generated at 5 cents. So 4,000 terawatt hours.
Okay, so that's the amount of electricity going through the system right now.
Right now, with only barely any of it being used for cars.
If we now include a forecast of the electricity needed for cars, and to assume the economy is going to continue to increase, and maybe there are some other developments, how much more must we increase the capacity of the electric grid?
I can see it easily doubling.
Easily doubling. So then we could say that
Instead
Biden's
of
advance.
4,000 in terawatt hours, we might use about 8,000 terawatt hours as we go into electrifying lots of things that we currently use, oil or gas.
So Biden's advanced electric grid is going to have to, as a minimum, double the capacity of the present capacity of the grid.
That's the objective. That's what Biden's forecast and the people are trying to. The money, the $2 trillion or $5 trillion or whatever, the few $trillion that we're talking about, is not going to do it. That's not enough to double your electricity. That will be done. That spending will be done by the industry. Biden's plan is going to set up the markets and set up the products and services that could be done, that could be delivered. And the expectation is that once the framework is ready over there, and yes, there is a movement to doing and going in this direction, industry will come up and say, oh, yeah, we do need to double the production of lithium, or quadruple the production of lithium, and quadruple the production of nickel, and all these things. And that's where the big money will be spent in the generations. They have about 200 billion for offshore wind, but that's really a very small amount.
Okay, but there's also discussion today about having the grid have the functionality to share more effectively distributed resources, energy resources. I think in the computer industry, we used to talk about distributed databases.
Yeah.
but now in the grid environments, it's distributed resources. What impact on the delivery systems or the consumption will impact the grid?
So it's a good and bad. It has both facets to it. As you distribute it, you can certainly reduce the load. You may need less to transfer the physical amount of electricity that you transfer. You could have a local generation system, a solar, right on your rooftop or in the factory or where you have. But you need to manage it a lot more, so you need more data transfer going. And so the wires have to be, the distribution system has to be a lot smarter, sensing all the time how much is being used, and if is there, here's happening something, the production of the electricity that was expected is not being met because a cloud has passed over this place or something.
Okay.
So small instantaneous changes, and it has to shuttle from one place to another very quickly.
So you said intelligence. That means computer technology.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And so it's a market opportunity for the computer companies, but you did not...
And data services.
Yes.
Yes.
And you did not touch on the threat of cyber. That's another computer
absolutely.
solution.
That's a huge. The more we rely on this, the more we are also exposing ourselves to that threat. And we have, so we have to absolutely guard ourselves against. And so this is also where tech companies will have to play a big role, as does the security community, to play a big role in making sure things aren't hacked. And unfortunately, we are already at a place that where people with bad intentions can attack our grid.
Yeah.
Can shut it off. Yeah.
All right. At the beginning of this program, you said the greatest investment will go in delivery. The creation.
Generation, yeah.
To create the electricity that will flow through the wires to all our offices, homes, in fact. So everyone talks about wind and solar energy. So that does it for us. Is that right?
Yeah, if you believe in tooth fairies. No, I don't subscribe to that thing. I think they are an important aspect, wind and solar. They're important particularly because they have the shortest lead time to install. But if you look at the total generation that is needed, and as the climate threat that we have to look at the global need of energy, it is so large that if I try to do it just by wind and solar, I'll be digging up the world. I'll be increasing the mining, and there'll be lots and lots and lots of hassles. The unintended consequences are enormous, both in terms of land use and in terms of the materials used. Storage is so that's a big thing, and I think we have to embrace nuclear power.
Okay.
And go ahead.
When I listen to PBS not PBS, but some other channels and everything, and I hear Biden and other political leaders talk about the energy needs, I rarely hear them mention nuclear energy. And let's take John Kerry. I remember he was on television several years ago talking about nuclear energy. What's he talking about now?
So that's a great example of a person who has really studied and gone through this and has come around to seeing that how nuclear is absolutely essential. I don't have to tell you that. There's a video of him that I think we can play right now. That's because many years ago, when you probably heard him the first time, he was on TV during Clinton's administration. At that time, shutting down United States' breeder reactor program, saying we don't need this. Do we have that video can we play that?
I remember the intensity of the nuclear debate when I first started in the environment back in 1970 in the first Earth Day. And I was on the other side of it then. But given this challenge we face today, and given the progress of fourth generation nuclear, go for it. No other alternative, zero emissions.
Wow.
So there was a speech, I think, he gave at the MIT to the to the crowd that was, I guess, a little more receptive to nuclear. I think the encouraging sign that I take from speakers, from people in Biden's administration, is they don't use the word renewables only. They use clean energy sources. They talk about clean energy standards. And that's, to my ear, that means that they are willing or more receptive to nuclear power. And in fact, they are. It's our Secretary, Granholm.
What did she say about it?
So she was a couple months ago she virtually attended this meeting in Wyoming. In Wyoming, they were scheduled to close some of the coal-fired power plants, and what they have decided is to go with utilizing the plant's electricity generation side and its connection to the grid and the resources in terms of the people that are there and keep them employed. But instead of having the coal burning over there, put a small modular nuclear reactor. And this will be the first demonstration of TerraPower, which is Bill Gates's company, that they have developed. It's one of the reactors. It's using that technology that they will be installing it over there, and it will be a great demonstration. The plant will survive because the rest and the people are going to get the jobs and everything, and those resources are all going to get utilized, and we will not be producing CO2 from that plant.
So what has Jennifer Granholm,
So, yes,
Secretary of the United States Department of Energy, have to say?
So she was part of it. She attended that, and she was very encouraging, and she recognizes the value of these things, of the value of nuclear power. If you look at her speech, which is you can find on the web, I think we can put the link for that sometime if you can put it up, or people can look for it. She makes a very strong statement recognizing that the whole Biden administration recognizes the importance of embracing nuclear power. And it's right now, it does take time, but there are some recommendations. I mean, one can look for, if you want to go forward, you need to do this in a big way. And there are steps to be taken.
So basically, the top man in the United States below the president, John Kerry, says nuclear is the only way to go if we are going to stop emissions.
Yeah, we have to embrace it. It doesn't say it's the only way to get it. It's not possible without it.
Okay.
They're not saying that we are not going to put wind and solar.
Sure.
You need them because many places that is perhaps the expedient.
And the Secretary of the Department of Energy said her organization is partnering with nuclear energy projects, which is also very telling.
Yeah.
I wonder, I believe you're giving a speech in November. And would you tell us where it is, and then would you give me an idea of some of the topics you will be discussing?
Yes, so this is the annual meeting of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, and they're having a special session on sustainability and energy and things like that. And they have invited me to give a talk, and I am really be plugging in a kind of talking about the need for nuclear energy in meeting and some steps that we can take. Because to my mind, the biggest hurdle that we have is the public opposition to nuclear. From years of fear mongering and the fear of radiation that is there, and the improper application of the what's called linear no threshold theory, which says that every bit of radiation is bad. These debunked theories have hurt us in proceeding with nuclear power. And so, one of the first recommendations that I have for the administration is to start a kind of a department of public outreach or educating the public in terms of the need for nuclear power. Other thing is, the second immediate stop is stop this nonsense of closing fully functionally nuclear power plants. And if you can resurrect, please do resurrect some of the ones that you have recently closed, because there is no reason. Nuclear technology has had the greatest record in terms of loss of life per unit energy produced. It is the safest. And in its absence, what we have done is put up plants like coal and oil and other things throughout the world, and they have a much higher fatality rates. So that would be number two.
All right.
Then the third real big one is financial things. We have placed lots of hurdles in the path for financing or for building nuclear power plants. World Bank and International Monetary Funds and some of these agencies do not allow for any funding to go for installing or building nuclear power plants in the third world or elsewhere. So those are some of the things that are absolutely essential.
All right, I'd like to ask this. So we have a few nuclear power plants in the United States. If we do not increase the number of them, and we continue to rely on coal, oil, and solar and wind, can we contribute to stopping stopping climate change?
Climate change is already happening.
Okay.
So it's not gonna. It's gonna get worse. Then is what it is. Yeah.
So
and how bad is? We can. I don't want to have a doom and gloom scenario. I mean, I don't subscribe to that doom and gloom. But yes, things can get very, very hairy, and we are on the trajectory to get to about 4 degrees C hotter by the end of this century, and that's way too much.
I want to be sure I articulated my question. If we don't build any more nuclear plants and we rely on expanding solar and wind, and we allow the coal plants, the gas plants, and the oil plants to continue to make a contribution, can we as a nation contribute to slowing the growth of climate change, or must we significantly increase the number of nuclear plants and shut down all the coal plants in the country? No doom and gloom there.
No doom and gloom. Well, we'll be taking a big risk. We'll be taking a real big risk because we cannot. If you look at, give me the breakdown. If I look at what the plan is, or if I don't add nuclear, but then either you are saying that you're letting people around the world suffer from lack of energy. Okay, so there's no social justice in that. But if I'm going to be saying that they're going to be entitled to improve their lot in life, and because we haven't developed products, and because the easiest thing is they'll say, oh, we'll emulate what you have done. We will start burning coal also more and more. The world is going to have a much higher temperature. There'll be emissions which stand near 40 billion tons of CO2 equivalent, could rise to 80 billion tons.
Okay, getting back to the electric grid. So you believe, and I think it's very logical, that the greatest investment that the Biden administration initiative will make will be in the generation of electricity.
Yeah.
And I think John Kerry and the Secretary of Energy and you believe much of that investment in the generation of electricity, that third component, should be in nuclear energy.
Yeah, you have to make, but right now I cannot invest in nuclear in that big way because there are no plans, no plants to put money in. It takes time to gear up. I don't have the workforce. It's not like I've got all the supply chains for the nuclear power plants to come in tomorrow and start building at that big rate to put in gigawatts and gigawatts of plants one after the other. So it'll take time. Right now, the money will probably go into wind and solar, which can be set up very quickly. And maybe they can make that contribution in some areas, but not everywhere.
Oh, so since contractors, architects, physics folks, people who already have, like Bill Gates's company or has investment, those folks are now going to start to ramp up and try to take advantage of the billions of dollars that are heading our way, and maybe some of the leaders around the world are going to come in and also start helping us ramp up.
Yeah, so this ramping up is taking place globally. Korea, China, India, they are ramping up. France is ramping up. France is going to be providing some. So there are positive signs in the world that it will happen.
Okay.
And there are companies beside Bill Gates's who are on the drawing boards. They should be pushing forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ripu Malhotra, thank you very much. I'm Michael Killen. Have a nice day and welcome. Thank you for welcoming us into your homes and offices.
And thank you, Michael, for giving me an opportunity to speak.
Good. All right. Goodbye.
Bye.